You are listening to the podcast of the Mathias Corvinus Collegium, the largest talent management institute in Hungary. If you want to know more about our mission, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter channels. For interesting articles and analysis of our professors, external contributors, and students, look up our knowledge base at corvinak.hu/en.
So welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be joined by Dennis Prager on MCC Podcast, writer, radio host, and founder of the famous Prager University, author of several books. You have written books on happiness, the Ten Commandments, the Bible, as well as on American values. And now you are one of the speakers of MCC Feszt here in Esztergom near Budapest, our first summer festival. Welcome, Dennis. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
When was the last time you have been to Hungary?
Just about 3 years ago. This is actually my 5th trip to Hungary.
Okay.
And my first 2 were when János Kádár was prime minister or president
different
or a
times.
dictator. I actually studied at Columbia University in the School of International Affairs. I studied Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. So it's ironic that I have a fair amount of knowledge of this part of the world. I learned Russian. I traveled through Eastern Europe regularly. And I have seen Hungary under goulash communism, post-communist, and now. So I have some perspective on your country.
Yes, because I've just learned that in the beginning of your career, you helped Jewish communities behind the Iron Curtain who couldn't emigrate. Have you traveled to these countries? So several times you had to travel to the Soviet Union.
Right.
So could you tell us a bit more? What was it like?
When I was 21 years old, I was in Israel visiting. And a friend of mine had a connection with the Israeli Foreign Office. Until 1967, the Six-Day War, the Soviet Union and Israel had diplomatic relations. The Soviet Union cut off diplomatic relations with Israel in 1967 during the Six-Day War. Until 1967, Israel sent in Israelis, young Israelis, to the Soviet Union to smuggle in religious items to Jews and to smuggle out names of Jews who wanted to leave. Because you had no chance of leaving the Soviet Union as a Jew unless you got an official invitation from Israel. It was a strange thing.
Okay.
And even then, most people were refused. They were called atkazniki, refuseniks. Mm-hmm. So I happen to know Russian and Hebrew. Hebrew I studied all of my life. Russian I studied at college. So I was like the perfect candidate to be sent in because they couldn't send in Israeli Jews. They sent in my case, an American Jew. I was 21 years old.
And sorry, why did you choose studying Russian at college?
Because I wanted to understand the enemy in the Cold War. Simple as that. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to understand the other, even as a child. So I studied Russian. I listened to Radio Moscow every night on my shortwave radio. And there I was, 21, sent into the Soviet Union to then Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, Moscow, and Baku, Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was part of the Soviet Union.
Very different places.
Yes, and it was an incredible 4 weeks. And as a result of that, I began lecturing in the United States on the Soviet Union and on Soviet Jews and Soviet dissidents. So I have been lecturing since the age of 21. I have a very odd life. Been public person literally all of my life as an adult. And that led to many other things, and finally, here I am.
And as you just said, you have spent altogether several months behind the Iron Curtain.
Oh, yes.
Or in the Soviet Union.
Yes, then I came back. Then I went 1 year, I went from Poland to Bulgaria, obviously, passing time in Hungary. And then the next summer, I went from Bulgaria to Poland. And I tried to explain communism to American audiences, and it was almost impossible.
And yes, this would be my next question, actually. Do you think that especially contemporary Americans know enough about what happened during that period, not only with Jews, but with those millions who suffered under communism?
I would say they know close to nothing.
Why is that?
Because the education system is bankrupt. The education system in the United States does not teach any longer. It indoctrinates. So you come out ignorant of the most important things. I don't believe that the average Harvard student can tell you anything about the Gulag Archipelago.
But when you studied at Columbia, right?
Yes.
Was that a different system? So in those times you were able to get this knowledge?
It was a little different, yes. But remember, I was at the Russian Institute. My task was to study communism. Every student at the Russian Institute heard of the Gulag Archipelago. But even when I was there in the early 1970s, there was still a great deal of indoctrination. But there was more education than today. Today, there is none. Today, the purpose is to produce anti-Western students, anti-American, anti-Western. There's a North Korean woman who miraculously escaped North Korea. It's extremely difficult, and of course, you're tortured to death if you are caught. And she went to China, and the Chinese do horrible things to North Koreans. They often just basically sell them to a man or a number of men, and it's a terrible life. But she escaped finally to South Korea, and now she's a student at Columbia in her late 20s, and she wrote, "I am learning to hate America as much at Columbia as I did in North Korea."
Why is that?
The sick people are taking over the media and education. Why that is the most complex question of our time. How could people living in the freest, richest country in the world have such contempt for it? And my theory is they have nothing going on in their lives. People need to fill their lives with meaning. The need for meaning is greater than the need for sex, which is a pretty deep need. But you can live without sex happily. You cannot live without meaning happily. People need meaning. The secular West has taken meaning away. And so that is why when Christianity, and I'm saying this as a Jew, when Christianity died in Europe after World War I, began to die certainly, you got fascism, communism, and Nazism. You get isms when Christianity dies in the West. What will happen in America with Christianity dying? You saw it in the riots of 2020. People need to fill their life with meaning. Now it's anti-racism. There is so little racism in America. 3 million black people have moved to America from Africa and the Caribbean in the last decades. Why would millions of Africans go to a racist country? Did Jews move to Germany in the 1930s? Of course not, because they knew it was anti-Semitic. Blacks wouldn't move to America if they thought it was anti-black. It's the most pro-black country that has blacks on earth. This is all lies. It's a gigantic world of lies to give these empty people meaning. You're taught in college that men give birth. You have no idea how bad the education system is in America. I beg people not to send their kids to college or to find a college that will teach them something good. In fact, I truly believe, if your child watched all 500 PragerU videos over and over and read the materials that accompany them, they would get a far better education and understanding of the world than at Princeton or Yale or most prestigious colleges. One student at Princeton, actually Bill Bennett's son, Americans will know who that is. He was the former drug czar in the United States, very well-known man. His son said, "I learned more at PragerU than at Princeton." There is a Harvard young woman who is working with me now, Harvard senior. She said, I have learned more at PragerU than at Harvard. And it's true. Now, we don't teach STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. You can't learn that at PragerU. But if you want to learn about the world and about life, and this is not an advertisement, it's all free. I'm not asking people for a forint. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, and by the way, I'm not happy that this is true. If facts and an appreciation of the West were taught, you wouldn't need PragerU.
We're going to talk later more about the founding of Prager University and some programs that you are running. Especially, I'm very interested in knowing more about your children program or your kids show. We're gonna talk about it. But let's talk a bit more about this ism we have already mentioned, communism. I have a very funny and interesting story about Arthur Koestler, who is a Hungarian Jewish writer, who was a Hungarian Jewish writer. And
Arthur Koestler?
Yes.
Yes, sure.
Yes, and
the god that failed.
Yes, and that time when he was a communist, he visited Milan upon the invitation of the Italian Communist Party, and he was brought up to Piazza di Leonardo da Vinci, from where you can see the whole beautiful landscape of that Italian city. And he told to those people who accompanied him that, it's very easy to be a communist here when you look down to the Renaissance city and all those beauty in Italy. This is, of course, a funny anecdote, but this can be true or applied to many Americans. And I wanted to tell you this story because I've just learned, mainly from the annual reports of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, that these years more than 40% of Americans have a favorable view on socialism. In Gen Z, it's almost 50%, while 30% of Gen Z and 23% of millennials have a favorable view of Marxism. How can you, effectively fight against this madness?
The only way is through education. That's why what you're doing is so important. That's why what we're doing is so important. If you just teach the truth, decent people will be anti-communist. If you are not anti-communist, it is because you're ignorant or just bad. There are a lot of bad people on earth. It's just the truth. One of the great idiocies of my whole life and the post-Renaissance, post-Enlightenment world is the belief that people are basically good. A truly stupid notion. Anyone who says it knows nothing about evil. And every religious Jew and every religious Christian knows that. It's one of the great divides between the secular world and the religious world. The Judeo-Christian world understands human nature is pretty bad. It can be made beautiful. A human can be beautiful, can be truly in the image of God, but you have to work on it. I have said all of my life, I went to religious school until I was 18 years of age. What was the biggest difference between my education and secular education in America? And here is the biggest difference. I learned that the biggest problem in Dennis Prager's life is Dennis Prager. In secular school, you learn the biggest problem in your life is America. That is a very big difference. I worked on changing me. They work on changing America.
I'm quite careful using the word totalitarian when describing certain patterns in America because I'm totally aware of the weight of it. Although it appears in public debates in an increasing number, like let's take Rod Dreher's new book. It talks about it. When you follow, for instance, the ex-New York Times journalist Barry Weiss Substack, you can run into frightening stories. But one can find many other, not only conservative writers or public intellectuals who claim that freedom is at stake in the US. What do you think? Or can we apply totalitarian?
Yes, you can apply it. I've said all of my life, because I truly understand the left, leftism is totalitarian. The only reason leftists will not be totalitarian is they don't have the power yet. But if they have the power, they will use it in a totalitarian way. I want to make clear, this is not true for liberals. Liberals are not totalitarian. Liberals are weak. So they are too weak to fight the left. The left is the enemy of liberalism, not the right. Conservatives preserve liberal values. The left destroys liberal values. And liberals don't want to acknowledge this. Barry Weiss does. This is a lifelong liberal that understands the left is her enemy, not the right. There are a number of liberals in America who have come to understand this, but they are very few. So yes, the totalitarian instinct is in the DNA of the left.
And do you think, are they winning now?
They are, of course they're winning. They have won Hollywood. They have won the mainstream media, television and websites and newspapers. They have won sports. You can't avoid their messages in sports. They have won in education, not only colleges now, high schools, elementary schools. So you are taught in elementary school that you will choose whether you will be a boy or a girl. Why would a parent send their child to a school that confuses their child about the most fundamental identity they have, male or female?
And maybe all these things you have just said were also among the reasons why you founded Prager University. Could you tell us a bit more about that? And how do you see this project now that I think 12 years passed has changed, its mission, its reality?
Well, my dear friend, Alan Estrin, who's also the producer of my radio show, whom I know since 1992, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, came over to me because I have taken cruises with my listeners, my radio listeners. I have a national radio show in America. So I have many listeners, and I've taken a cruise every year except the last two because of COVID. And we've gone all over the world, Antarctica included. And anyway, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, Alan Estrin, who is a very serious man, never makes jokes, comes over to me and says, Dennis, I think we should start Prager University. I have such respect for Alan that...
You already came up with a name.
He already came up with the name. He said, Dennis, we need to create something that gets your ideas to more people than the radio show. So of course, that's my life's mission, is to get my ideas out to a lot of people. So I said yes and thought that was the end of it. I didn't even think about it. But Alan is serious. And so we started putting out the videos. And in the beginning, we were very happy if we would get 10,000, 100,000. 100,000 is a respectable number. Anyway, within a few years, we were getting 5 million views for any video, sometimes 20 million. And now we get 1 billion views, over 1 billion views a year. And this is the most interesting part of the statistic. Over 50%, in fact, 65% are under the age of 35. And I know this anecdotally. When I walk through airports, it's mostly young people who come over to me for a selfie.
And that's a great feedback.
It's phenomenal. It's just phenomenal.
When you started contacting those people in the beginning who have become the storytellers, so to say, of your videos, it was more because you found their expertise so interesting that you thought their messages would also work in your format, in the short video format, or there has been already a need of giving platform to such voices as the mainstream media, for instance, ignore them. Let's take Jordan Peterson and the others who already appeared in one of your videos.
Yes, no, both are true. We would try to find, we are proud of everyone who was given a video. We choose them very carefully, and we try to give over the basic ideas of this person in as clear a way as possible. The most work in every video the most work is clarity. Every sentence must be clear. Even 5 minutes, you have to work to keep people's attention. So therefore, if we only have 5 minutes, and by the way, in 5 minutes, you can get a lot of information over. And if we only have 5 minutes, however, every word must be carefully chosen. We've been very successful at that. And everything we say is relevant to Hungarians as much as to Americans, to people in Africa as much as to Hungarians. I am very aware of the international audience. I do a fireside chat every week. My bulldog, Otto, sits next to me and sleeps while I talk. And every week, and there are now 199 of them up. When I return to America, I'm doing the 200th fireside chat. And half the questions come from young people outside of the United States.
Just one question before we dive into that part, because you're also giving, as you've just said, lots of advice to especially young people in your shows. You also might have heard of the debate around Hungary's new child protection law that is in favor of letting the parents decide how to educate their children, especially when it comes to sex ed, sexual education, and prohibiting schools to expose minors to LGBT propaganda, we should say. So this triggered many debates and discussion on education. And PragerU has recently launched kids shows, not only for little children, but you've got shows for teenagers as well. Is that an answer to similar questions that are now heavily debated around education in the US too?
Well, first on the issue of what children are taught in much of the West now, certainly the United States and other English-speaking countries, they're the worst. Canada may be worse than the US, but I'm not sure. Canada is less free than the US. I don't know if it's worse about what it teaches children. Let me make something clear. I'm a religious Jew. It is a basic belief of Judaism, as it is of Christianity, that you give love to the stranger. It's a law, it's a very frequent law in the Bible, love the stranger. Anybody who hates a gay person is sinning against God, right? I want to make that clear at the outset. At the same time, why does anything having to do with such matters need to be taught to children? The only reason is, as you put it, as propaganda, not education. They should not be taught anything anti or anything pro. The issue should not be raised. That's all. I was against sex education in schools from the beginning. That's parents' job. But the left has no regard for parental authority. That's how I know the left is a cult. Every cult diminishes parental authority. The Soviets had Komsomol. Your allegiance was to the party, not to your parents. In fact, there was a child hero, Pavlik Morozov, a child hero in the Soviet Union. They made a postage stamp about him because he told the authorities he was a Ukrainian child. He told the authorities in 1932 that his father stole bread to feed the family while Stalin was killing 5 to 6 million Ukrainians with the famine. His father was executed and the child was a hero for snitching on his father. The same with the Hitlerjugend. Your allegiance was to Hitler, not your parents. And that is what is happening with the left. Your allegiance is to the left, to the school teacher, not to your parents. So this is a very serious issue and has been for decades. So that is why people are worried about the schools. They have no business telling my children that anything about these matters, pro or con. I don't want them to educate them anti-LGBT. It just doesn't belong there.
What are the things that you would like to, show or make an emphasis on in your kids show, for instance, so for teenagers?
It's such a big project to have a substitute for school, but we're gradually having books, little books on for little children based on my dog, Otto.
Okay.
Otto and me are the figures, and we go back in history, and we teach kids about history as fairly and honestly as possible. We have older materials for teenagers, and obviously every teenager should just be watching our videos. They're clear enough for a 14-year-old, even a 12-year-old to understand. So parents are relying a lot, and we have a program called PrEP, for Prager University Resources for Educators and Parents. And some school teachers who are not leftists or just liberals who want children to see both sides of an issue will play a Prager University video in their classroom. And sometimes they get in big trouble. In Toledo, Ohio, a teacher showed one of our videos. One parent complained that PragerU is right-wing and there's no room for right-wing. There's only room for left-wing in our school. And the school, of course, caved in because people are weak, and they stopped showing the video.
You have already mentioned the videos that mainly young people send you. And we are here talking at MCC Feszt, a youth festival, which is labeled, for instance, in the Daily Beast as a far-right conference in Budapest. We are not in Budapest, actually. It's not a far-right conference. It's a youth festival. So let's talk about young people.
Well, let me just say, far-right is like Stalin called Trotsky a fascist. Trotsky, a lifelong communist, the father of the Communist Party, along with Lenin, the head of the Red Army, and he called them, that's what the left does. They call anyone who opposes them far-right. They've been doing this since Stalin. This is nothing new. No, people don't know it because they don't know history. But I'm used to this. This is all they do. What makes you far-right? That you want kids to know Hungarian history? That you don't think sex education belongs in school? This is far-right? I'd like to know what is far-right about it. Why isn't it common sense? I want your kids to know about Hungary, and I'm not Hungarian. There is a beautiful thing in being knowledgeable about your country, your past. Obviously, there are bad parts to everybody's past, and we need to be truthful. Nevertheless, for a child to be happy and proud to be a Hungarian is a good thing. Otherwise, what are they, a European? Why is that a good thing? Why is European identity better than Hungarian identity? I'd like to know. Why is it better? And why isn't human identity better than European identity?
What does that even mean?
And it means nothing. It doesn't mean anything. That's exactly right.
Yeah. In many of your videos, actually, especially in the fireside chats, you talk frequently about the importance of character, respect, the difference between men and women. You answer young people's questions. So it seems, although you have already said that the broad majority, or at least the majority of your audience, is consisting of young people, you also find it crucial to communicate with them, to interact with the younger generations. So it also seems that youngsters need encouragement and advice more than ever. Why is that? Why do you think they are so eager to receive advice?
Well, that's a very good question, and there is some good answers. As I told you, your listeners will know about PragerU. Most will not know I have this national radio show. I have millions of listeners in the United States, and I've been broadcasting for 35 years. It's a very interesting thing. So I started in my 30s. I started very young. And over time, callers, especially men, younger men, would say to me, Dennis, I just want you to know you are a father figure to me. And I was always actually very touched by that I was a father figure to some younger man. Every man should try to be father figures to young men. That is the goal of men. Be a father to young men, not just your own children. And very few people are taught that. That is our role as we get older, to be a father figure to younger men. They need it terribly. Many didn't have it at home, and very few have it in society. Who's going to be my father figure? The average actor in Hollywood? They're mostly boys, not men. So that became a very big factor in PragerU. This father figure that I represented, and not only I, but obviously me especially. I'm Prager. So I think that has been a terrible need. Very many young men don't have a father figure. Many fathers, I can't speak for Hungary, obviously. It might be true, it might not be true.
It's the same here.
Yeah? All right. Well, what I'm about to say, I would be interested if it's the same here. Many fathers in America want to be their child's friend, not father. Mm-hmm. The role of a parent is not to be your child's friend. They can have 100 friends, but they get one chance at a father or a mother. Your task is to be a parent, not a pal, not a buddy. And a lot of parents have not played the role of parent, so they don't have a father figure as such, and they crave one. So that's part of the answer.
Dennis Prager, unfortunately, we don't have more time, but I really, really appreciate your time here in Esztergom at MCC.
My pleasure. Köszönöm szépen.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this MCC podcast episode. For further media content, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or look for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to read more by our professors, external contributors, and students, check out our knowledge base at corvinak.hu/en.